For this story, I would ask you that you pick a number between 0 and 9. Do you have it? What is it? Please don't tell me it is 7. Is it? Alright. This trick does not always work, but 7 would be the most chosen number. 0 and 9 won't be so much, as the extremes always seem less random. Let's go back to 1937, to a radio show hosted by the Zenith Radio Corporation. They came up with the idea to test extrasensorial perception, also known as ESP. The experiment was very simple. Each week, people inside the show would attempt to send 5 different thoughts to the audience in sequence. For instance, they could send X's or O's to the audience, and the possible sequence could be XXOXO or OOOOO. The audience would not know the sequence, needed to send via mail to the radio station what they had thought to have received telepathically. The radio station would then total the number of correct telepathic answers and conclude whether the audience, or at least part of it, had telepathic powers. To make this even easier to visualize, let's make the radio show experiment ourselves. I'm going to attempt to send you 5 different thoughts, which could be either X's or O's. What you need to do is receive my thoughts, either X's or O's, and write them down. So please do it. I'll share my actual thought in a bit for you to compare. So, are you ready? I'm sending you now thought 1, now thought 2, thought 3, thought 4, and finally thought 5. Did you write everything down? Alright, let's continue. Let's add the probabilistic lens to this. We have 5 different runs in the thought sending process with 2 different options. The total amount of possibilities is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, or 2 to the power of 5, which is 32. The fair share each possibility would have to be chosen is 1 out of 32, which is around 3%. If a certain option has more than its fair share of possibilities, let's say would be chosen by 5 or 10% of the people, and that option is correct, it is very likely that those people have telepathic powers. In the radio's first experiment, around 10% of the people had correctly chosen XXOXO. Since 10% is way bigger than 3%, it is very unlikely that this was random. Therefore, the radio show came to the conclusion that some people in its audience had telepathic powers. Now, do you agree with this conclusion? Now, please pause here and think about the question. The radio ran the experiment several times, and some weeks there were a lot of people with telepathic powers, and some weeks there weren't. You see, the combination of X and O's was random, but the audience was not. A combination like XOOXO was chosen 30 times more often than OOOOO or XXXXX. The audience was predisposed to choose combinations that seem random, like XXOXO. 5 O's in a row does not seem like a natural combination and appears biased. Consequently, the most common combinations shared by the listeners were actually similar each week. You see, we have the predisposition to assume what is likely and less likely, even though we are terrible at measuring probabilities. Therefore, we converge to what we think is a normal result, even though a result like XXXXX is as likely as XOOXO. Let's now travel in time once more, now to 2009 in Iran, when the elections happened in that country. There were some suspects that the election was rigged, but there was no proof of any wrongdoing. The analysis to understand whether there was any suspect was done by Bernd Weber and Alexander Skako, graduate students from Colombia, to whom I apologize already for not knowing how to say their names. The Iranian election had 4 main candidates for the presidency. The analysis consisted in looking into the total results of the 29 provinces for each candidate, which meant a total of 116 numbers, which is the number of main candidates times the number of provinces. So 4 times 29, that is 116. If you were to look into the last digit of the total votes for each candidate, you would expect that the distribution between 0 and 9 to be well dispersed, with around 10% for each of the possible digits. Now, as you can imagine, if it was rigged, that may not have been the case. In fact, number 7 had twice the share of its normal frequency. So number 7, the digit, was the last digit of the votes in more than 20%. Of course, this is no proof of any fraud, but it should have been worth investigating it. Anyway, now let's close the loop. I'll share my sequence of thoughts. Are you ready to compare? Let's do it. It was OOOOX. Now, did you get it right? It would be super cool if you shared what you got in the Q&A or student communities. Until the next video, have fun.